this is Anita with 5 Minutes with Art. Another great artist that we can consider also to be a late bloomer in life was Paul Cezanne. Paul Cezanne influenced the course of art profoundly. He was a master of design, color, composition, and draftsmanship. And his art influenced many other artists that saw his work and got great influence from his work. In fact, even, Vincent van Gogh admired Paul Cezanne quite a bit. So Paul Cezanne was born in 1839 in the southern French town, and he was the son of a wealthy banker. As a young boy, he developed this intense artistic interest that put him at odds with his father. It wasn't until 1862, after many bitter family disputes, that Cezanne was given a small allowance and set to study art in Paris. And so, he really had to fight quite a bit with his family to become an artist. He was captivated by radical elements. He deeply admired the romantic paint, a lot of, different painters. But he really was sort of like this, kind of maybe a little bit more of a radical. His early works were, kind of moody, romantic expressionism. His works then later began to change. His style involved painting outdoors. He was very quickly and on a small scale, using small strokes and pure color. But he had many struggles and was quite isolated. And that's the truth of, as you learn about many of these artists, the thing that I mentioned again and again, for those of you that are artists or in art, and maybe, you feel like you're struggling, or maybe you're not even in art, maybe you just feel like you're struggling with something in your life. Many of these great artists did not become great immediately. They struggled for a long time. And Paul Cezanne is one of those. He struggled for quite a long time, that he, began to exhibit some with the Impressionists in 1874 and 1877. Although, commercial success kind of really eluded the group. And, Cezanne's work attracted a lot of harsh criticism. So, here were these Impressionists, a great movement that we know of today, but yet they were being very harshly criticized and they weren't receiving the successes they thought they should. This, experience kind of led him to distance himself from a lot of his Parisian colleagues in the late 1870s and 80s, and opting instead to spend most of his time in southern France. But then at the same time, he began to inherit his father's wealth, and he inherited his father's wealth when he was quite young, at age 47. So this allowed him to be independently wealthy. He was one of the artists that didn't need to depend upon earning a living or selling paintings. In fact, he was quite wealthy. So, he was able to, even though he was socially isolated, he had the money that he needed to have. It's interesting to note that him and Van Gogh painted a lot of the same scenes differently, but they painted them differently. But they were kind of, you could say, contemporaries. We don't know whether they ever really knew each other, but they were sort of contemporaries that knew of each other. What is interesting about Paul Cezanne is that for most of his life, he sort of remained a secret. He was known only to mainly his Impressionist colleagues. They of course knew of him, but he didn't have much success. But all of that began to change in 1904, when an art dealer saw his work, and his work got into these exhibitions and became well known. But he didn't live very long after that. Only 2 years after that did he live. So his success was actually very short-lived. It didn't happen until very much later in his life that he even became known. But he really is an artist that many other artists have looked up to. He had this vibrant color palette, his brush strokes, how he used his brush strokes. It influenced many other artists along the way. He really is quite a fascinating artist to learn and to study about. And I really do, love his colors and his choice of artworks. And his brushstroke can seem kind of haphazard, but really it's not. It's very, very beautifully done. I have a blog that I've written about him entitled The Artist Paul Cezanne, A Bridge of Two Artistic Eras. We'll put a link to that blog into the description in case you're interested to be able to learn more. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you spending a few minutes with us each week to learn about art.